She said she could handle him. Certain no man could shake her until one look from the cowboy made her knees go weak and her heart forget its armor. Is she falling for trouble? Or for the only man strong enough to match her fire? The wind came down from the mesas in slow, sultry waves, carrying the scent of dry sage and horse sweat. Arya Vale tugged her hat lower against the glare as she stepped off the coach and into Dust Creek, a town that looked like it hadn't seen a drop of rain or a woman like her in months. Men paused mid-step, mid-drink, mid-thought, watching her boots strike the dirt like she had every right to walk it. She didn't flinch. She'd spent years learning not to. The letter in her pocket crinkled with each breath, a job offer from the Boone Ranch, signed by its foreman, Cassian Holt. They said he was the kind of man who didn't smile, didn't forgive, and didn't like strangers. Arya wasn't here to like him either. She was here to earn her way, to prove she didn't need saving. Not anymore. The saloon doors groaned open behind her. Laughter spilled out, rough and lazy. A man tipped his hat and said something she ignored. Her hands clenched at her sides, a reflex from too many miles of being underestimated. The livery boy pointed her toward the ranch 5 miles west, through the canyons. She rented a horse, saddled her own gear, and set off before dusk. The horizon burned copper and gold, the air alive with the hum of crickets. When she saw the ranch, it was like a story half told. Wide fences, an empty corral, a house that had seen better years. A single figure stood by the gate, Cassian Holt. Tall, broad-shouldered, dust on his boots, and a shadow on his face. The kind of man who didn't need words to fill the silence. He was the silence. "You're the new hand?" His voice was deep, smooth as smoke. "Depends who's asking," she said, swinging down from her horse. One brow lifted. "I'm the one signing your pay." "Then yes, I'm the new hand." He looked her over once. Boots, gloves, defiant chin, and turned toward the stables without another word. "We start at dawn. You bunk in the east shed." No welcome, no handshake. Just that quiet authority that made her bristle, and against her better judgment, notice the way the sunset cut through his hair, like fire through wheat. She didn't come here to notice men. Still, when he glanced back just once, her heartbeat betrayed her. That night, Arya lay awake, listening to the creak of the barn and the steady rhythm of horses breathing. She told herself she could handle him, handle the work, handle this place. But something about the way he'd looked at her, steady, unreadable, like he'd already figured her out, made her uneasy in ways no danger ever had. And she had a feeling Dust Creek wasn't done testing her yet. If you've ever thought a woman could tame the wild on her own, wait until you see what happens when the cowboy starts to notice her. Morning came with the chill of dawn and the smell of horses. Arya was already up, sleeves rolled, braid tucked under her hat. The east shed was little more than 4 walls and a cot, but it would do. She'd slept in worse. When she stepped outside, Cassian Holt was already in the corral, working a restless chestnut stallion. The horse kicked up dirt, wild and angry, but Cassian moved with steady patience like a man carved from the very land he ruled. Arya leaned on the fence rail, arms folded. "Do you plan to tire him out, or earn his respect?" Cassian didn't look at her. "That depends which one you think he deserves. Most men I've met prefer control over respect." That earned her a glance sharp, fleeting. "You'll find I'm not most men." She smirked, though it hid the way her stomach twisted at his tone. The air between them was thick, charged. She could almost feel the heat from where he stood, the calm command in every movement. By mid-morning, he handed her a pitchfork and pointed to the stables. "Let's see if the new hand can keep pace." Arya didn't answer. She just worked. Hours passed, hauling feed, fixing stalls, brushing down horses. Cassian didn't speak much, but when he did, it was simple, direct, without an ounce of condescension. It almost unnerved her. When the sun reached its peak, she wiped sweat from her brow. Don't suppose you offer lunch breaks around here? Cassian handed her a canteen. You get one if you've earned it. She took a long drink, refusing to break his gaze. Guess I earned half then. For a second, just a second, his mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. Then it was gone. They worked until the sky burned orange again. She noticed things about him she hadn't before, the way his voice softened when he spoke to the horses, how his silence wasn't cold but deliberate, thoughtful. But every time she thought to ask him about the ranch, about why it felt so heavy with memory, his expression shuddered. That night, the ranch grew quiet. Crickets sang. The stars stretched endless above them. Arya sat outside the shed, staring up, feeling the ache in her arms and the strange lightness in her chest. Cassian passed by on his way to the main house. He paused when he saw her. You handled yourself well today. She arched a brow. Wasn't aware I needed your approval. You don't, he said simply, but you earned it anyway. And then he kept walking, leaving her staring after him, heart thudding like a wild drum. Arya let out a slow breath. For years she'd told herself she didn't need anyone's respect, especially not a man's. But something about the way he said it, low and sincere, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. She didn't want to admit it, but she already knew Cassian Holt was going to be harder to handle than she ever imagined. The next morning brought a quiet kind of heat that settled low and heavy across the valley. Arya rode out before sunrise, her hat pulled low and her canteen slung at her side. Cassian had told her to check the north pasture fence for breaks alone. She wasn't sure if it was a test or a dismissal, but either way, she'd prove she didn't need his watchful eye. The Boone Ranch stretched endlessly in every direction, wild and stubborn like the man who ran it. The land was scarred but alive, patches of green clinging to the dust, a creek winding through it all like a silver thread. Arya stopped at the edge of that creek, letting her horse drink. The reflection in the water showed someone she barely recognized. A woman sunburned, strong, unafraid. She'd come to Dust Creek running from something she didn't talk about. A job gone wrong, a betrayal that still burned when she thought about it. But out here, the silence didn't ask questions. The sound of hooves broke her thoughts. Cassian rode up behind her, reins loose in his hand. The fence line's too wide for one person, he said, as if it were an afterthought. Arya didn't look up. Didn't peg you for the worrying type. Don't worry, he said. Responsibility. He dismounted, knelt beside the fence, and tested the wire. His hands were scarred, steady, the kind of hands that spoke of years spent fixing what others broke. Arya crouched beside him, and for a moment they worked in easy rhythm, pulling, tightening, hammering stakes into dry soil. After a while she asked, "This ranch has always been yours?" He paused. "My father's before me, his before him. Now it's just me. Have you ever thought about leaving?" He looked up at her, eyes shadowed beneath his hat brim. "Have you ever thought about staying?" The question hit deeper than he knew. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, turning back to the fence. When they finished, Cassian led her to a patch of shade near the creek. They sat without speaking, the water glinting between them. Arya caught herself watching him, how the light softened the hard lines of his face, how still he could be, like a storm that hadn't decided whether to break or pass. "You've got away with silence," she said finally. He gave a half smile. "Most folks fill it with noise. I figure if you listen long enough, silence tells you what's true." Arya studied him, that calm certainty wrapped in dust and muscle, and wondered if he ever let anyone close enough to hear the truth he kept inside. When he stood to leave, she lingered by the creek. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running. She felt seen. But as the wind shifted, carrying the sound of a distant rider hoofbeats fast, urgent, Arya's chest tightened. Dust Creek wasn't as quiet as it seemed, and whatever she'd been running from might just be catching up. By the time Arya and Cassian reached the ranch that evening, the sun had slipped behind the ridges, painting the sky in bruised streaks of violet and gold. The air felt charged, too still, too watchful. Cassian noticed it too. He dismounted and scanned the horizon like a man used to danger sneaking in on quiet feet. "Something wrong?" Arya asked, sliding from her saddle. He didn't answer right away. Someone was out near the North Trail earlier. Tracks too fresh to be one of ours. Her pulse skipped. Could have been a traveler. "Could have been," he said, though his tone made it clear he didn't believe it. They walked the horses into the stable. The silence between them wasn't cold, just heavy, full of things unsaid. Arya tried to focus on brushing down her mare, but her hands trembled. She knew how to read fear in men like Cassian Holt, and though he hid it well, it was there, under his calm. When they finished, Cassian leaned against the stall door. "You want to tell me what you're running from?" Her brush stilled mid-stroke. "Who says I'm running?" He tilted his head. "You don't look back unless you're afraid of what's following." Arya met his gaze, steel against steel. "Maybe I just learned not to trust anyone too quick." "Then you and I got that in common." The barn lights flickered in the dim. Outside, the coyotes started their lonely chorus. Cassian's eyes softened, just enough to let her see the man behind the armor. "Whoever's out there, I'll handle it. But if there's something I need to know, tell me now." She hesitated. For a heartbeat, she wanted to tell him everything about the man she'd escaped, the debts that weren't hers to pay, the danger that carried her name, but she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she said quietly, "I can handle myself." Cassian nodded once. "I don't doubt that." They locked eyes, neither backing down, both hiding more than they'd admit. Then he pushed off the stall and tipped his hat. "Keep your lamp low tonight. If you hear anything strange, don't step outside." Arya wanted to argue, but something in his voice, steady, protective, final, stopped her. Later, alone in the shed, she sat by the small window, watching the shadows stretch long across the fields. A lone figure moved near the far fence just for a second, then gone. Her chest tightened. She reached for the pistol she kept wrapped in her saddlebag, the one she hadn't needed in months. Maybe Cassian was right. Maybe the past wasn't done with her yet. In the distance, thunder rolled not from the sky, but from hooves. A storm of a different kind was heading straight for Dust Creek. And this time, Arya wouldn't be the one running. The next morning, I broke sharp and restless. A storm had passed in the night, leaving the ground slick with mud and the air heavy with the scent of rain. Arya hadn't slept. Every creak of the shed had kept her eyes open, waiting for the sound of footsteps that never came. By dawn, Cassian was already saddled up. His jaw was tight, his shirt damp from the mist. "Tracks lead south," he said when she approached. Ryder came close to the barn, circled, then left. Arya tried to keep her voice even. Could have been a drifter. He gave her a look that cut straight through the lie. Drifters don't ride with purpose. She wanted to ask how he knew, but she didn't have to. Men like Cassian Holt had seen enough danger to read it from miles away. They rode together along the ridge, the morning wind tugging at her coat. Arya's thoughts were loud in her head. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the man she'd left behind couldn't have found her this far west. But the unease in her bones said otherwise. When they reached the southern edge of the ranch, Cassian dismounted and crouched near the dirt. The hoof prints were deep, fresh. A second set trailed behind the smaller indent of a mule, not a horse. "Someone carrying cargo," Cassian muttered. "Or someone who doesn't want to be noticed." Arya's throat tightened. "Cassian," she stopped herself. "If this turns ugly, it's not your fight." He straightened slowly, his gaze steady on hers. "You work my land, you sleep under my roof. That makes it my fight." The simplicity of it hit harder than any promise she'd ever heard. They rode back in silence, the tension between them wound tight as wire. When they reached the yard, Cassian handed her the reins. "Stay close to the main house tonight. You'll be safer there." "I don't need protection," she said. heat rising in her chest. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. Maybe not. But I'd sleep better knowing you're not alone out here. The words hung between them, low and rough. For a second, she forgot to breathe. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, concern, maybe even fear, but not for himself. For her. That night, Cassian lit the lanterns around the porch and sat watch with his rifle propped beside him. Arya tried to rest, but every gust of wind made her heart jump. Near midnight, a shout tore through the darkness. Cassian was on his feet in an instant. By the corral, a horse whinnied, wild with panic. A shadow slipped between the fences, fast and deliberate. Arya reached for her pistol. Cassian's voice cut through the night. "Stay inside!" But she didn't listen. As the lightning flashed across the plains, she saw the man's face and her blood ran cold. The past hadn't just found Dust Creek. It had found her. The storm broke hard that night. Thunder cracking like a rifle shot over the plains. Arya ran from the shed toward the corral, pistol in hand, her boots sinking deep into the mud. Cassian was already there, rifle raised, eyes narrowed against the lightning's glare. The stranger stood by the far fence, soaked, furious, familiar. Even after all these months, Arya knew that face. Jed Rowan. The man who'd once called her his, who'd sworn he'd hunt her to the ends of the territory, if she ever left. "Even in, sweetheart," Jed drawled, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Took me a long time to find you." Cassian stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You're trespassing." Jed smirked. "Didn't come for you, rancher. Come for what's mine." His eyes slid to Arya. "She and I have unfinished business." The words twisted her gut. Arya's voice shook, but her aim didn't. "You don't own me, Jed. Not then, not now." Cassian's tone was low, dangerous. "You heard her. Leave." Lightning flashed again, white against the dark, and for a moment the world stood still, the three of them caught in a standoff that smelled of rain and gunpowder. Then Jed moved, fast, drawing from his hip. Cassian fired first. The bullet struck the dirt by Jed's boot, close enough to make him stagger. "You'll get one warning," Cassian said, calm as steel. "Next one won't miss." Jed's grin faltered. "You think she's worth dying for?" Cassian didn't blink. "I don't think so. I decide." The thunder swallowed his words, but the message was clear. Jed spat into the mud, eyes burning with hatred, and turned his horse. "You can't hide forever, Arya. You never could." She didn't lower her pistol until his silhouette vanished into the rain. Cassian turned to her then, jaw tight, rain streaking down his face. "You should have stayed inside." Her voice cracked. "You should have let me handle it." His eyes softened. "You don't handle men like that alone." The anger she'd held back for years finally broke. "You think I wanted him to find me? You think I haven't spent every day looking over my shoulder?" Cassian took a slow breath, stepped closer. "No, but you don't have to keep running." For the first time, she didn't pull away. The rain poured between them, cold and relentless, but the air was thick with something warmer, something dangerous. Cassian brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. His touch was steady, grounding. "He won't touch you again," he said, voice quiet but sure. And for once she believed it. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch drenched but alive. Cassian stood watch on the porch, while Arya sat by the window, pistol resting beside her hand. The danger wasn't gone, but she wasn't the same woman who'd run, either. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of being found. She was ready to fight back. The morning after the storm, Dust Creek felt quieter than it should have. The air was damp, the ground heavy with footprints that the rain hadn't quite washed away. Cassian followed the tracks at dawn, jaw set, eyes hard. Arya trailed behind him, her nerves sharp but steady. "Jed won't be far," Cassian muttered, crouching to inspect a hoofprint by the creek bed. "He's waiting for something, or someone." Arya's stomach tightened. He's waiting for me. Cassian straightened, meeting her gaze. Then we end this before he gets the chance. He said it so simply, as if it were nothing more than another chore on the ranch. But Arya saw the weight behind it, the promise of violence, of protection he hadn't asked to give, but couldn't turn away from. They returned to the ranch before noon. Cassian called his men together, a few trusted ranch hands who'd ridden with him for years. He gave orders quietly, efficiently. Fortify the fences, keep the herd close, no one rides out alone. Arya watched from the porch, feeling both grateful and restless. Every instinct told her to run, to keep moving, to stay one step ahead of the man who'd ruined too many years of her life. But when she looked out across the land, his land, now partly hers by the sweat she'd given it, she knew she was done running. Cassian joined her, wiping his hands on a rag. "You said once you can handle yourself," he said. "Still true?" She met his gaze without hesitation. Every word. "Good," he said, passing her a rifle. "Because when Jed comes back, we handle him together." That night, the ranch glowed with the faint warmth of lanterns. Arya cleaned the rifle on the porch while Cassian checked the perimeter. They didn't talk much, but silence wasn't their enemy anymore. It felt like an understanding. When Cassian finally sat beside her, the weight of the day settled between them. "You ever think," he said quietly, "that maybe some people are meant to cross paths because they've got the same ghosts chasing them?" Arya smiled faintly. Or maybe they just needed someone who wouldn't look away when the past showed up at their door. He looked at her then, not like a boss, not like a savior, but like a man seeing a match to his fire. A rustle broke the stillness. Cassian was on his feet instantly. The barn door creaked open, wind pushing it just enough to moan. Both raised their weapons. But it wasn't Jed. It was the preacher from town, hat dripping rain. He looked uneasy. "Cassian, you best know Jed Rowan's down at the saloon. He's talkin' mean, sayin' he's ridin' here come morning." Cassian's expression didn't change. "Then morning's when it ends." Arya felt the heat of his words all the way to her bones. Tomorrow she'd face the man who'd broken her, but this time she wouldn't be alone. And that made all the difference. Dawn rose slowly and red over Dust Creek. The kind of morning that felt like it had been waiting its whole life for a reckoning. The air was still. Even the horses were quiet. Arya stood by the porch, rifle in hand, her heartbeat steady but fierce. Cassian was saddling his mare, every movement deliberate, his jaw set like iron. "You don't have to be out there when he comes," he said, not looking up. She gripped the rifle tighter. "I do. This isn't just your fight, Cassian." He finally met her eyes. "No, but if he touches you again, it'll be the last thing he does." Something in his tone, low, unshaken, absolute, settled the chaos in her chest. By mid-morning, the dust cloud appeared over the ridge. Jed Rowan rode at the front, his coat torn, his eyes meaner than ever. 2 men trailed him, hands near their holsters. The sight sent a familiar shiver down Arya's spine, but this time, fear didn't follow it. Cassian stepped forward as the men reined in at the gate. "You're not welcome here." Jed laughed, loud and ugly. "You think you can keep her? She's a thief and a liar. Took money that wasn't hers." Arya's voice cut clean through the morning. "That money was mine. You stole my life, Jed. I just took it back." He turned toward her, sneering, curling his lip. "You always had a smart mouth. I should have fixed that when I had the chance." Cassian moved between them in an instant. The air went electric, 2 men facing off, the ranch holding its breath. "Try it," Cassian said quietly. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Jed swung from his saddle, boots hitting the dirt with a thud. His hand hovered over his gun. Cassian didn't flinch. "You sure you want this, Holt?" Jed taunted. "You'll lose her. You'll lose everything." Cassian's voice dropped low, even. "I already lost everything once. I'm not making that mistake again." The words hit Arya like a strike of lightning. She realized then, he wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting with her. Jed's hand twitched toward his holster, but Arya was faster. The shot cracked through the silence, echoing off the canyon walls. Jed froze, shock flashing across his face. His hat flew off, a bullet hole grazing the brim. Her hands didn't shake. Next one won't miss. For once, Jed Rowan saw something in her he couldn't fight, resolve. He backed away slowly, rage simmering in his eyes. This ain't over. Cassian stepped closer, rifle steady. It is if you want to keep breathing. Jed spat in the dirt, then mounted his horse and rode off into the rising heat, his men scrambling after him. When the dust finally settled, Cassian turned to Arya. You didn't hesitate. She exhaled, shoulders shaking. I've been hesitating my whole life. He looked at her, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Whatever haunted them before ended in that dust. What began there would change them both forever. The sun climbed high over Dust Creek, burning off the morning chill, but not the tension that lingered after Jed's departure. The ranch was quiet again, too quiet. Every sound felt amplified. The clank of metal, the creak of wood, the restless snort of horses sensing unease. Cassian had spent the morning riding the perimeter, scanning the horizon for dust or tracks. When he returned, he dismounted slowly, eyes narrowed. He's gone, he said finally, at least for now. Arya stood by the corral, watching him. He'll come back. Cassian nodded. Men like him don't know when to quit. But next time, he won't find a scared girl waiting. Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile. Guess he'll find a better shot then. That earned her a faint, genuine grin. It softened something in his face she hadn't realized could bend. You've got grit, Vale, he said. Maybe more than most men I know. Guess you're finally admitting I can handle myself. He met her eyes, something warm flickering there. I never doubted that. I just didn't want to see you have to prove it. For the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, Arya let herself breathe. The ranch had changed her, it had steadied her hands, hardened her heart where it needed to, and softened it where she didn't expect. But peace never lasted long in Dust Creek. Near sundown, a rider came fast from town, a boy barely old enough to shave. He reined in hard at the gate, chest heaving. Mr. Holt, Miss Vale, the sheriff sent me Rowan's in lockup. Came in half drunk, hollerin' about you two. Said he's comin' back for her once he's out. Cassian's jaw flexed. How long till they let him walk? Tomorrow, maybe sooner. He's got friends payin' his fine. The boy tipped his hat and rode off. Silence fell again. Cassian turned to Arya, his voice low. You've got a choice. Ride east tonight. Get clear of Dust Creek before he's loose. Arya shook her head. If I leave now, I'll be running forever. I can't live like that anymore. He stepped closer, his presence grounding her like the weight of the earth itself. Then you stay. But if you stay for good. You hear me? No halfway. She looked up at him, seeing not just the man who'd protected her, but the one who'd taught her how to stand on her own. I'm not halfway about anything, Cassian. The last light of day fell across them, warm and fleeting. For the first time, she didn't see Dust Creek as a hiding place. She saw it as home. As the stars began to rise, Cassian reached out, brushing his thumb over her cheek, a touch both tender and unspoken. Whatever comes tomorrow, he said, we face it together. Arya nodded, heart steady. Together. And in that quiet, under the open western sky, she knew that whatever storm was coming this time, she wouldn't face it alone. Morning broke over Dust Creek like a held breath, finally released. The air was clear, soft with promise, as if the land itself had decided it was done carrying old ghosts. Arya stood by the porch rail, hat in hand, watching the sun climb over the ridge. It had been 3 days since Jed Rowan's arrest turned into his final ride. 3 days since the sheriff made word that he wouldn't be coming back. Ever. Cassian had said little about it. He didn't need to. The quiet that had settled between them wasn't born of fear anymore. It was peace. Hard-won, fragile, and real. She found him by the stables, mending a gate that didn't truly need fixing. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, the morning light tracing gold across the scars on his forearms. He glanced up as she approached. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," she replied. "Too quiet." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that felt rare and genuine. "Guess we've both forgotten what quiet feels like when it isn't dangerous." Arya leaned against the fence post beside him. "I'm starting to think I like this kind better." For a while, they worked side by side, the rhythm easy, companionable. There was no tension now, just a steady calm that came from surviving something together. The silence was full of meaning rather than fear. When they finished, Cassian wiped his hands on a rag and turned toward her. "Are you thinking of leaving?" The question landed softly, but it wasn't casual. It was an opening. Arya looked out across the pasture, the horses grazing beneath a sky washed clean. "I came here running, thought I'd stay until it was safe to move again, but somewhere between mending fences and facing down devils, this place stopped feeling like a stopover." Cassian studied her, his expression unreadable, though his eyes carried a depth she'd learned to trust. "Then, maybe it's time you stop running altogether." She smiled slow, certain. "Maybe it is." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of pine and smoke clinging to him. "Arya," he said quietly, "this ranch has seen droughts, storms, and worse. But you," his voice faltered slightly, honest and rough, "you're the first thing that's made it feel alive again." Her breath caught. "Careful, Holt. Sounds like you're getting soft." "Maybe," he said, a spark in his eyes, "but only for you." The wind carried a laugh from her lips, light and free. He reached for her hand, fingers rough but steady, and she didn't pull away. The moment stretched between them, simple and sure, the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Out beyond the barn, the ranch hands called to one another, the day beginning. Arya looked around, the fences mended, the land alive, her heart steady for the first time in years. She'd said she could handle him. Maybe she could, but she'd never expected he'd be the one to make her stay. If you thought love couldn't rise from the dust, wait until you hear what happens when another stranger rides into Dust Creek.